Welcome everyone to another edition of Dropkick DiSkussions Podcast presented by Sportskeeda. I'm your host, Korey Gunz, and with me as usual is wrestling insider extraordinaire and, dare I say, new YouTube sensation, Tom Colohue. Tom, how's it going?
New YouTube sensation, oh my word. Yeah, just point everyone in the direction of, come see his face. He feels really good about himself. Let's show him off. Yeah, cheers.
Hey, well, if you don't know, Tom posted some videos on YouTube after Survivor Series, some instant reactions and things, and it got a positive response. Actually, you posted one and got such a good response, you did a second. So, just a little bit of shameless plug in there for you, bud.
Yeah, it's the response was very positive. I am quite grateful for the reception I've got, and I don't know, it might continue, it might not, it depends how I feel, but I'm giving it a shot, why not?
Yeah, and since you talked about it on your YouTube channel, let's go ahead and talk about it here. Let's talk about Survivor Series reactions. Obviously, we're coming off the heels of that this past Sunday, and the first thing that you got to take away from the show is I got to ask you if you were as surprised as I was at not only NXT winning the brand war at the show, but how hard and how strong they were put over the other brands. They doubled up in the number of wins that SmackDown got, and Raw got only one win on the entire show.
I was definitely surprised. It was a much improved performance when it comes to these events. Usually Raw wins, sometimes by a landslide, unfortunately, but this time not only did Raw lose, but by a considerable amount. NXT doubled the total of SmackDown. It was 4 times the score of Raw. We sat and we did our preview and our predictions, and I was expecting NXT would get one. I expected Roderick Strong to pick up the win, but that would probably be it, because from here on, the brands are very defined, very split. I did not expect it to go so strong, but clearly someone wanted to put NXT over as much as possible.
Did you feel like there was someone in particular on the NXT brand that you thought really stood out and got the spotlight? I think I talked about it even with Fred Rosser on our podcast earlier this week that we did the Rosser Rewind, and if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do. It's posted on the Sportskeeda YouTube channel right now. But he talked about how impressed he was with Keith Lee, and I had to agree with him. I thought that he probably came away looking the best, especially in that 4-on-4 match. But as you mentioned, Roderick Strong had a good showing in his triple threat. The Undisputed Era of Fish and O'Reilly were there. Ciampa was involved in that 4-on-4 match as well. Of course, you had Shayna Baszler winning the big women's triple threat. So if you had to pick an MVP from the NXT brand at Survivor Series, who would have been your pick?
Well, I think it's, as you say, there are some obvious choices. There are a number of people who were involved who perhaps didn't get as much attention as I expected. Tommaso Ciampa definitely one of them. Io Shirai was another one that maybe didn't get as much focus as I expected, but they are also people who had a very good showing at War Games. So while, for example, Rhea Ripley had a very good showing, I wouldn't say she was the top show, the top performance. Shayna Baszler, another one, perhaps because the main event was not the best match on the card. I think Baszler did not have that sort of top tier section, but certainly she continued to perform as you expected Baszler. You've mentioned Keith Lee, certainly he was put over hard, but for me, the real winners for NXT, the match of the night, was actually the NXT Championship match. Adam Cole has come out of this looking everything people expected him to be. Absolutely tremendous. Pete Dunne in that match as well, perfect foil. The two put together a fantastic match and really looked good in that spotlight. So for me, Adam Cole was probably the one, but Keith Lee certainly had a good showing as well.
When you look at the booking of this show, a lot of the response on social media was, well, obviously Triple H must have been in charge of booking Survivor Series. That had to be the reason why NXT was put over and also put over so strongly. Do you have any information about what influence did he have on this show? Did it take some convincing of we know that everything goes through Vince McMahon. I think that there's no debating that no matter what people want to believe of, ultimately Vince has to put his seal of approval on anything that's going to go down on television and pay-per-view. But do you think this was a situation where Triple H had to kind of nudge and prod Vince to get him to put over this third brand on such a big pay-per-view show? Or was it by design that this was the idea from the get-go, that they were going to introduce NXT into Survivor Series for the sole purpose of putting over the brand and maybe getting some more eyeballs on Wednesday nights for the NXT show as they go up against AEW Dynamite?
There's no doubt that Triple H did a lot of prodding and poking and encouraging, but he said himself, it is a collaborative effort. The three sort of executive directors, the people in charge of each brand, got together and decided how they were going to do this. But when it comes to the decision to put NXT over this strong, that comes down to Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon wanted NXT to look strong, and he was also the deciding factor behind, for example, Adam Cole beating Daniel Bryan. A lot of moments along the way, tag team looking good, Shayna Baszler looking fantastic coming into a tag, Rhea Ripley and Tegan Nox getting a tag team win. These were Vince McMahon decisions. He was the one who wanted NXT put over this strong. I don't know how strong an influence Triple H had on that, but the three executive directors got together to execute Vince McMahon's vision. So Vince said, this is what I want. They went away and they decided how they were going to make that happen. I think the exception to that is the SmackDown show, the night after Crown Jewel. That was written very much on the fly. There was no time to really be collaborative. But that was a template that they followed going forwards.
I wanted to get your opinion. When I watched NXT TakeOver, which I thought was a great show, one of the things that I really enjoyed about that is that they didn't use that as a last-minute sell for Survivor Series. And what I mean by that is they didn't have any Raw or SmackDown superstars interfering in matches. They didn't have any invasions. They weren't shown in the backstage area or anything like that. It was a very NXT-focused show, and it focused on the issues of the superstars of the NXT brand that they'd been building up for the past couple months. Then you get to 24 hours later at Survivor Series, and for a lot of the NXT teams on the 4-on-4 elimination matches, both the men's and women's, you had both friend and foe teaming up to represent the NXT brand. And to me, there were instances where they seemed awfully chummy with each other. I can remember one instance in the women's match where Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair are over in the corner kind of cheesing it up and talking to each other and different things. And I know that it's not real and it's all storytelling, but to me that kind of rubbed me the wrong way to think that, hey, for example, Ripley and Belair, they were just in War Games 24 hours ago trying to rip each other's faces off, and now they're here at Survivor Series and they're best buds just because they're going up against Raw and SmackDown at Survivor Series. As a fan, did that have any effect on you as far as watching the show, or did you think that was kind of strange? Because that was the one thing that I picked out that I was kind of a little bit iffy on. It kind of took me out of the moment a little bit, that these people that I saw in War Games just last night are now tag team partners and apparently getting along just fine.
Well, I completely agree with you on both points. With War Games, there was a conscious decision not to have Survivor Series interfere with War Games. I think that comes back to trying not to alienate the core audience. So with NXT, they didn't want to harm the brand or make it look like anything less than the underground, or that style it has of being the underdog against the two big guys. So they didn't want interference. They didn't want too many people coming in. They wanted a very classic takeover show, and they got that. The only person there who really sort of was added last minute was Kevin Owens. That was a build towards Survivor Series, which didn't really have a payoff, but it got a big pop. It's a recognizable name, and it added some power to the card. Certainly it was an interesting little piece, and I very much enjoyed it. When it comes to Survivor Series itself, you hit the nail on the head. With everyone other than the ones competing in that women's elimination match, all the characters were consistent. Everyone did what everyone would normally do in that situation. Rhea Ripley, I have to ask questions. I have to. Because I'm a huge fan of Rhea Ripley. I've written about her at length and how I firmly believe she is going to be a huge star. And the main reason for that is that she knows her character so well. She knows who she is, she knows what she's doing. I've written about the casual brutality. And when it came to her appearance in the Royal Rumble, she was able to show that. It is not the same character when she helps Bianca Belair with her feet on the ropes to pin someone. It is not the same Rhea Ripley when it is 2-on-1 and she looks scared getting into that ring. It's also not the same Candice LeRae who fakes an injury, comes back near the end and distracts the referee so that Shirai can essentially cheat to win. It's not the same. There were definite character inconsistencies there, and I don't feel there needed to be. If you want to put NXT over, don't have them cheat to win. Rhea Ripley could have beaten Natalya, could have beaten Sasha Banks. There were so many moving parts in that match. You could have very easily had it so that NXT became an afterthought. Raw fought SmackDown until suddenly there was only maybe 2 on each team and still 5 on NXT. That fits the underdog theme. That fits everything. If you want to put over Rhea Ripley, put over Rhea Ripley. That for me wasn't the way to do it.
Well, I don't think that we can really leave Survivor Series weekend without talking about one more topic. Mauro Ranallo was obviously one of the announcers for NXT War Games and was scheduled to be the NXT representative in the booth for Survivor Series. And then the night of the show, he's not there. And we're given the explanation by Michael Cole on TV that it's because his voice gave out the night before that calling War Games, that he lost his voice and so he couldn't appear on the show. The real story appears to be that Corey Graves made a tweet during the NXT War Game show that was critical of, or apparently critical. He didn't mention Ranallo by name, but it appeared that he was referencing Ranallo and being very critical of his commentary during the NXT show. He made a couple of tweets himself and then also replied to some people on Twitter and made some other comments, something along the lines of, there was a Hall of Famer and an ROH champion also in the booth. It'd be nice to hear from them, and that Ranallo was making too many hip-hop references and things of that nature. And we know that Ranallo has dealt with some mental health issues in the past, and word is that because of these tweets from Corey Graves that it triggered some of those issues for Ranallo, and that was the real reason about why he was not at the show in Survivor Series. Now, since on the After the Bell podcast, Corey Graves had issued a somewhat of an apology. Again, he didn't mention Ranallo by name, and he kind of gave the sorry if what I said offended you. So it wasn't really a true apology in some people's minds. It was more of sorry that I offended you or sorry that you took it that way. So that's created a little bit of buzz on social media and kind of kept this story going. What can you tell us about the situation between Graves and Ranallo, and then also kind of the induction of a dirt sheet writer into this situation that Graves kind of brought in and seemed to be a little bit upset about the way that this story was being reported? I know there's a lot in there. I know I asked you a lot of questions. I know I do that a lot, but so just tell us what you can about and kind of unpack for us this Corey Graves and Mauro Ranallo situation.
Okay. I appreciate that you talk about a writer rather than naming by name. That is obviously a preference that I have, and I appreciate you respecting that. When it comes to Mauro Ranallo, let's start with from the beginning. We all know that Mauro Ranallo has some mental health problems. He has historically had those, and he works very hard to overcome them. He's a firm advocate for mental health awareness. He's a very positive voice, and that is a very good thing, especially in the wrestling world where everyone, the men are supposed to be sort of classical butch men who refuse to go to the doctor for anything, even if their arm is falling off and so on and so forth. That's been loosening. People have been, masculinity has been evolving in general. And Mauro Ranallo is a perfect example of a more modern form of masculinity. He's aware of his mental health, he's challenging others to be aware of theirs, and he's making people better, I feel. He's that positive aspect. When it comes to Corey Graves, he's obviously quite an outspoken, confident person. He always has been. He definitely always will be. So with two figures like that, when they encounter each other, it's possible there'll be some sort of clash. It depends how well they understand each other. Mauro Ranallo was not at Survivor Series. He wasn't at home nursing a lost voice, but I understand why they would say that, because it may be that Mauro himself did not want to talk about his reasoning. It might just be that simple. However, the information then got out. The information was technically out beforehand, and it's been expanded on since then. Now, the writer in question, who you have mentioned, went on in more detail about that on his podcast or his informational letters, and Corey Graves took offence to this and essentially challenged said writer to give him a call. Now, if that was an honest challenge from Corey, even if it was phrased quite aggressively, then fair enough. If these two people can get together, have a conversation and see what's going on from Corey's point of view, fair enough. If it was a genuine offer. However, the person we really have to focus on is Mauro Ranallo, because we have news now. This is, of course, record on Wednesday. So it's before NXT happens, but we are aware, according to Post Wrestling, he will not be on that show. Mauro Ranallo will not be there. And yes, Corey Graves did apologise. We have to ask the question, is that an adequate apology for Mauro Ranallo? Because apparently it isn't. But it's worth asking the question, is Corey Graves the source of the upset, or was Corey Graves a trigger to an upset that was already there? Mental health isn't usually just one trigger point. It's not usually just one person who is the cause of everything. So I would like to give both men the benefit of the doubt. I appreciate, as someone who has had some struggles with mental health as well, that Corey Graves did apologise, even if I do feel similar to you. It was a bit of a apology if you were upset. I feel it was a bit of that. I feel he could have done a little better there. But he has more access to have conversations with Mauro Ranallo than we do. So the two of them will know more about the situation than we do. We'll see going forward. I hope that Mauro Ranallo comes back soon. And I hope that Corey Graves can show a little bit more understanding in the future, as I'm sure this incident will have encouraged.
Do you think that we'll see any action taken against Corey Graves, such as, maybe pulling him off of a SmackDown broadcast, or, any type of suspension or anything like that? Or will it be simply something that the higher-ups think he and Ranallo need to address between themselves and then, make amends and move on?
Mauro is a very popular person. I'm confident that there are enough people in his corner, at least in NXT, to ensure that action will be taken. However, this is the WWE. Whatever action is taken, even if that is no action, we are unlikely to see it. It's unlikely to be all visible. And to be fair, I think in this instance, education is the answer. I think Corey needs the opportunity to learn a bit more about the suffering that Mauro is going through. And I think that will stand him in good stead. So to help him understand rather than punish him.
Well, we certainly wish our best to Mauro and hope to see him back soon. And, there's really, I guess, no great segue here into our next topic. So we'll just kind of fast forward now 24 hours after Survivor Series and talk about Monday Night Raw, the follow-up. And I will say I have to give myself maybe a half pat on the back here, because during our prediction show for Survivor Series, I did predict that NXT would win the 4-on-4 men's elimination match. And I thought that because they could then use that NXT win to start some storylines and some angles on Raw and SmackDown. NXT did not win the elimination match, but they did win the night, and the half pat on the back for me is that we saw that exact thing on Raw that the NXT Win at Survivor Series precipitated a pretty large angle, or at least the start of a large angle, and it was headed up by Seth Rollins, who we may or may not have seen possibly turn heel. What did you think, Tom?
Well, it's a return to a 2016 feud, so it's been a long time apart. I think these two men work extremely well together. I think it's interesting seeing Owens as the face and Seth as the sort of heel. I'm not entirely sure it's a full heel turn. Anybody I've spoken to and asked about this has been quite clear that it's complicated. That we may see Seth be a heel in one feud and a face in another feud, much like Roman Reigns has been. Like he was a heel against AJ Styles, and then he was a face against Seth Rollins in a brief time back after he beat Triple H at WrestleMania 32. So I wouldn't call this a full-fledged heel turn, but there are certainly a lot of heel elements, and Seth himself is definitely playing up to it, including with the way he's been challenging CM Punk. So we'll see on that one. I'm excited for Rollins against Kevin Owens, especially with the lineup. Rollins being the sort of authoritative figure again. He was extremely good doing that, and Owens thrives with that sort of opponent. It's just a shame that there is no title for either of them to be chasing, really.
You mentioned, Seth Rollins challenging CM Punk and really playing up kind of the heel persona, and I know this is looking way into the future, but now that Survivor Series is over, we're kind of on our way now to the build-up to the Royal Rumble, which is officially the start to the road to WrestleMania. Do you think, is there any way possible that even right now at the end of November, that the signing of CM Punk to Fox, the quasi-heel turn by Seth Rollins, and how quickly Seth Rollins jumped on Twitter to immediately go after Punk, and I know that you're a big proponent of this on Twitter, that CM Punk is not returning to the ring or did not come back to the WWE to get back in the ring, at least when he was first signed. But is there any possibility that this was the plan from the get-go to eventually get to Seth Rollins versus CM Punk at this year's WrestleMania?
I've always said, and I will still firmly say it, CM Punk has no interest in returning to wrestling. He has said this again and again, and when a first-hand source tells you something, you have to believe it. Because you have to take people at their word. If he says he doesn't want to wrestle, then he doesn't want to wrestle. At the same time, I've reported recently on Sportskeeda that there is a encouragement from WWE management to go out and talk about CM Punk and to be positive about CM Punk. I don't know whether this was before Seth Rollins made his challenge or whether or not that encouraged them, but Seth Rollins knows how to make a big deal out of himself. He knows how to be a star. He knows what the biggest possible match in the WWE is right now, and it is literally anyone against CM Punk. So it's not impossible. But Triple H has said recently the conversation still hasn't happened. So at this point, CM Punk is still not a wrestler, and he still doesn't want to be a wrestler, no matter how much Seth Rollins may want it, and no matter how much WWE management may want to see that match.
Let's talk a little bit more about Raw. One of the things that stuck out to me about Monday's show is it was a reminder to me about how much talent is actually on that brand. One of the, complaints of fans is here lately is that even for a 3-hour show, a lot of it has been consistently built around the same people and the same storylines and angles. But on Monday, I felt like they did a really good job of giving something for everybody, of really utilizing a lot of the roster. There were a lot of guys that were featured that I had kind of forgotten about or hadn't done a lot recently, in recent weeks. Guys like Aleister Black, who I think is a huge star in the waiting. I wish they would do more with him. I think he's one of the guys that could really be the next big thing, a la Brock Lesnar. I even think a match between him and Lesnar would be something that I would really enjoy. So, guys like him, guys like Buddy Murphy, AOP, finally kind of interjected themselves into a main storyline. Even somebody like Matt Hardy, who kind of returned out of the blue. I know I was completely shocked to see him turn up on Raw and get back in the ring. Hadn't heard anything about him coming back. And then even guys that we had seen recently being featured didn't have much to do on Monday. Guys like the Viking Raiders, the Street Profits. So really, to me, it was a reminder of how deep Raw's roster is if they really choose to utilize it and really use that 3-hour block to the best of their ability and use it to their advantage. What did you think about the number of names, and especially names that maybe we hadn't seen do much recently, appearing on Raw? And is this a sign of the future that maybe we'll see a little bit more parity in who we see on Monday nights?
There have been a lot of people who haven't been appearing much. I would agree with that. Between the wildcard rule taking up a lot of time on the shows, and now NXT's appearances and the build to Survivor Series taking up a lot of time on the shows, there are a lot of people who simply haven't been featured. And I'm with you, I think that is a crying shame. There's a couple of people, AOP is a perfect example, who have had a slow build. So there's someone who hasn't had much time, but that's mostly to build towards something. The Viking Raiders have been in squash matches, so they're being visible but not altogether there. Aleister Black, same thing. I think it's quite telling that now, after Survivor Series, we start the build to WrestleMania. Usually at this point we can see a couple of the potential matches. I think maybe Nakamura, Daniel Bryan is one that's starting to look like it might be a WrestleMania match, for example, even though that will probably take a long time to actually get there. But this isn't normally a time when you start to see stars who aren't at that top level. And certainly when it comes to TLC, you'd expect the matches to be that top level of people. Paul Heyman a long time has been a proponent of a lot of the different guys on the roster, giving them time. However, and I've touched upon this in a report recently, the NXT invasion did have some negative consequences for people lower down the card. It did rob quite a lot of airtime, and there are a few people, not all, but a few people who aren't happy about that in that locker room. Quite a lot of people in the locker room are happy, they want to put their fellows over, they want to make everyone look good, but there are quite a few people, for example, who were in NXT quite recently, even as much as a year ago, and if they were still there now, they would be getting a bigger push than they have been in the entire year they've been on Raw. I think that's quite telling. I think a lot of these won't be on the WrestleMania card, but I think the names being sort of pushed and promoted now will be making that cut.
You can talk about guys that maybe aren't necessarily happy with where they are. Are we talking about guys like an Aleister Black, maybe a No Way Jose, guys of that nature?
Unfortunately, I can't really go into details of names. People talk to me who have legitimate gripes, who maybe don't feel they've been listened to, and I don't really want to put them in hot water. There are people, some of them are lower down the card, some of them are more middle of the card, but there is a concern for their careers based on a lack of opportunity, and this may be going some way to address that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to try to put you on the spot there. I just meant, like you said, the genre of characters we're talking about, guys that were in NXT that maybe were brought up to the roster quickly without anything readily there for them storyline-wise, that if they just stayed in NXT, a guy like an Aleister Black, the Viking Raiders even maybe, they probably would have been on that NXT team at Survivor Series or been in one of those high marquee matches at Survivor Series, as opposed to brought up to Raw, maybe a couple months too early without really anything ready for them, and now they're just kind of lost in the shuffle.
That is certainly possible. There's a few names who that could cover, but I can't say whether or not it relates to them, but if they are in that position, they would, in my opinion, certainly have reason to feel a little bit aggrieved, but hopefully that will be answered soon enough.
Let's switch over to the Blue brand now. SmackDown will be coming live to us again on this Friday, and the big marquee event for that show, we've already seen advertisements for, is that apparently there's going to be a new character brought to the Firefly Funhouse. Bray Wyatt says that there's going to be a new face in the Funhouse on Friday, and a lot of rumors swirling around about who exactly that character may be. Anything that you can tell us about that, and what you're feeling about this new added character, or maybe a new added branch to the storyline that is Bray Wyatt and The Fiend?
It's nice to have a little bit more of The Fiend to grab hold of. The character has, in my opinion, it's getting a little bit repetitive now, especially when you consider that when they step into the ring, the Bray Wyatt character, the story's sort of the same. You can't just keep throwing him at people without some sort of character development. An extra character could certainly play into that, but the last time we had an extra character, it was Husky the Pig. So I'm not entirely sure it's an actual person. I know that there are rumours of that, but they have been discredited quite heavily. A lot of people, even in Sportskeeda, I know our colleague Gary Cassidy is quite excited by the idea it might be Liv Morgan. I can't personally see that. I don't think the idea of Liv as Sister Abigail is in any way compatible. Just based on what I've seen of Liv Morgan, I don't feel she's the right fit, and I feel she will do different things better. Who it could be, many possibilities. It could be a tease for someone like a Daniel Bryan or a Braun Strowman. It could be. We know that Bray Wyatt will be competing against Braun Strowman at the Starrcade event, which is happening this weekend, so if they're going to be showing that show, they need something towards it. But there are a number of possibilities. I'm not sure it will be an actual real person. I think it might be another puppet, and it may even in fact be a puppet of Daniel Bryan. So we'll have to see on that one. I don't get much information about Bray Wyatt, and to be honest, sometimes I quite like that because of what he comes up with. It's fresh to me, it's interesting, it's exciting. We will see what happens. But last time it was a puppet, and I don't see any reason it shouldn't be this time.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I've got a feeling that it's going to be not an actual person, but just another puppet or caricature of someone. As you mentioned, Liv Morgan has been the name that everybody's been kind of throwing out there that could be the new character. There was a little bit of a stir on Twitter when a supposed costume designer had tweeted something out that looked like some designs or some storyboards about possible costumes for a Sister Abigail. That has been debunked, that account is fake, and that there is no costume designer for the WWE that's tweeting out hints about future characters. So that shouldn't be used as a reason why to think that it would be Liv Morgan. And personally, I'm not really sure why there's such a clamor for people to seem to want Bray Wyatt to make a stable or a group of characters. I, for one, I wouldn't want a real Sister Abigail. For one, I think that is part of his past character. It's part of the Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family character, which I think he's moved on from with this Fiend character. And I don't see the Fiend character as someone who would have a group or a stable like the Wyatt family. So I'm not really sure having, followers or a physical embodiment of a Sister Abigail or something like that would really fit in with this new incarnation of Bray Wyatt.
I would completely agree with you there. I think at the moment he's found a way to be a lone character. Not only that, but he does have a stable. There's two people, The Fiend and Bray Wyatt. If you add another character to that, are they there for The Fiend or are they there for Bray Wyatt? It's a very confusing process, which it's already a little bit confused in a good way. But I think if you add someone else, it starts to get confused in a bad way. Not to say that they won't do that, or it might be a slow build to a storyline where, for example, using the Braun Strowman example again, a follower sort of rejoins and then undoes that, so like the NWO always used to. But Bray Wyatt is such a strong solo character at the moment. I don't think we're going to see him pair up with Luke Harper or someone like that again, even though Luke Harper is now available. I'm not sure. We'll have to see, because the man behind the mask is a very strong proponent for people. He stands by people. He stands up for people. He has a very strong record. He was encouraging the WWE to put Braun Strowman in the Wyatt family, to debut him with the Wyatt family. He wants to work with people he likes, and I know Harper's one of those, and I know Strowman's one of those. But this particular character, I don't see it working out long term.
I'm sure whatever happens this Friday, we'll be talking about it here on next week's episode. So make sure that you guys check out SmackDown. Let us know what you all think this new character in the Funhouse will be. Is it going to be a physical character? Will it just be a puppet? Give us your thoughts in the comment section here on the podcast. Make sure that you are subscribing to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel so that you get updates about when new episodes of mine and Tom's podcast drop, whenever Gary Cassidy posted a great new interview, or like I said, whenever the newest edition of the Rosser Rewind is posted. Again, if you haven't checked that out, Fred Rosser, formerly Darren Young of the WWE, is now doing a monthly podcast with us here at Sportskeeda. He's joining me once a month to talk about some of the highlights of his career and some of his career milestones. And this past week, we just talked about the time that the Primetime Players won the WWE Tag Team Championships. So there's a lot of good things in there. We talk about that. We talk about the Nexus. We talk about a potential Nexus versus NXT feud. A lot of good things in that podcast, and that's posted up right now on the Sportskeeda YouTube channel as well. Tom, I want to thank you again for joining me again this week. Make sure that you follow him on Twitter at Colohue. Anything else that you want to mention before we get off here? Tell anybody about any big things you've got going on, or where they can find some of your latest reports.
At the moment, Sportskeeda is still host to all of my individual reports. I will still post things on Twitter, but that's usually single source stuff, or where I'm still trying to find some things out. You get the occasional tidbit on there, but my physical reports, the one where I've got 3, 4, 5 sources all lined up, they're on Sportskeeda. I am considering a little bit more of the YouTube thing. That's on my channel. Those will be posted on Twitter fairly regularly after a show. If I stay up until 4 a.m. and watch SmackDown, I might pop one up there. They're not very well produced, but I'm just starting out, so benefit of the doubt. But yeah, thanks for having me, and as usual, I hope everyone clicks like and enjoys the listen, and let me know what you think.
Absolutely. Make sure you follow Tom over on YouTube as well and check out his videos, and make sure that you check us out every week right here on the Dropkick DiSkussions Podcast presented by Sportskeeda. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.